Distinguished comrades, friends and family at home and abroad, good evening and welcome to the 9th annual Patricia J.A. Pantophlet Memorial Lecture. This effort aims to honor the life and enduring legacy of our dearly departed sister, aunt, comrade, daughter, mentor, and friend, the late Patricia Pantophlet. And hopefully, we will be able to introduce her ideas to the next generation of social and political activists, disruptors, instigators, philanthropists, and of course, community leaders. My name is Bakari Makaru, and I have the pleasure to serve as your host this evening. Miss Patricia Pantophlet was born on June 2nd, 1957, on the beautiful island of Aruba to Mr. George R. Pantophlet, better known as Batlin Ziki, and her mom, Mrs. Maria Anastasia Pantophlet. She was the fourth child of 11 children. Miss Pantophlet attended the Pete de Boer Elementary School, Abraham de Vere Secondary School, and the University of Aruba. She moved to St. Martin on August 15, 1975, and worked as a full-time receptionist at the Great Bay Hotel and as a part-time cashier at Burger King. Shortly after, she started working at the Department of Labor. It was at this time that Ms. Pantophlet also took up an active interest in trade unionism and joined the Windward Islands Civil Servants Union and Private Sector Union. As a former president of the Windward Islands Civil Servants Union and the first president of the Windward Islands Chamber of Labor Unions, she fought tooth and nail for the dignity of the working class. Even while waging a quiet, fierce personal battle against lupus, she never wavered. Family, before we proceed, to have our keynote address, I would like to make the following announcement. The first announcement is as follows. The Windward Islands Teachers Union is hosting a fundraising barbecue food sale on Saturday, June 13th, 2026 at its headquarters in Madam Estate from 11:30 a.m. until 4 p.m. Tickets are available from the president of the Y2, Ms. Roxana Pantophlet, and her hard-working team. So I encourage everyone to be sure to support this worthy effort by purchasing at least 2 tickets and pick up your meal before heading over to watch the annual St. Martin Flag Day Parade starting at 3 p.m. My second announcement is as follows. I would like to extend a happy belated Anguilla Day to our family in Anguilla, and I must say that this year's theme, Empowered by Yesterday's Legacy, Inspired by Tomorrow's Promise, is in my humble opinion extremely timely and applicable to the region. And just as a wordy mention, I think I'm going to steal that particular theme because, as I said, I think it's very timely considering all that is happening in the region today. And my final announcement is that Mindful Elevation Caribbean will be having another informative discussion on the topic Beyond Birth, Beyond Survival, Conversations on Motherhood, Recovery, and Mental Health, hosted by Dr. Anders Ramonda Hansa. So, of course, stay tuned for more details. But in the meantime, I invite you to please visit, subscribe, like, and share her YouTube channel, which is at Mindful Elevation Caribbean, and her website at www.mindful-elevation.com. And of course, for the yoga lovers, there will be yoga classes on Wednesdays starting at 5 a.m. I know it's a bit late, but 5 a.m. at the Emilia Wilson Park, and on Tuesdays from 5:30 at the John Lamini Center. And again, for more information, please contact Dr. Anders Ramonda Hansa. Family, comrades, our keynote speaker this evening is none other than the president of the Anguilla Civil Service Association, Ms. Susan Hodge. And her presentation this evening is entitled Caribbean Labor Union and Peace. After her presentation, of course, you, our beloved viewers, will have the opportunity to join the conversation and ask your burning questions or simply to share your thoughts on the subject matter. So therefore, we are all one family, so there is absolutely no reason to be shy. Susan Hodge is an English-born Anguillan whose life and work reflect a deep commitment to service, resilience, and community development. She served as the Anguilla Public Service in various capacities for almost 40 years, recently retiring as Director of Disaster Management. Her professional journey has been shaped by a strong foundation in disaster risk management, public education, preparedness, leadership, and regional collaboration. Susan is a graduate of the University of the West Indies and the University of Gloucester. She is also a certified business continuity manager, a UNICEF Return to Happiness trainer, a member of the International Association of Emergency Managers, and distinguished Toastmaster. Through Toastmasters and other avenues of service, she has developed and shared her leadership, communication, facilitation, and mentoring skills across local, regional, and international spaces. A trade unionist from her youth, my apologies, Susan currently serves as president of the Anguilla Civil Service Association and has served as a member of the Public Service Pension Fund Board. Her regional trade union service includes Assistant General Secretary / Treasurer of the Caribbean Congress of Labor from 2019 to 2022, Substitute Women's Titular for the Caribbean Sub-Region of Public Services International from 2012 to 2018, and President of the Caribbean Public Services Association from 2016 to 2017. A firm believer in lifelong learning, Susan has never let the grass grow under her feet. She remains active in community service and in the past held leadership roles in the Anguilla Red Cross, Blowing Point Youth Development Center, and the Anguilla National Council of Women. Throughout her career and volunteer service, Susan has sought to serve with humility, purpose, and consistency. Her work reflects a continuing commitment to public service, disaster risk reduction, trade union advocacy, women's advancement, leadership development, and the strengthening of Anguilla and the wider Caribbean. With that being said, it is my distinct pleasure to invite my comrade, Ms. Susan Hodge, to deliver her presentation on Caribbean labor and peace. Comrade, you have the floor.
Thank you, comrade. Good evening, comrades, colleagues, sisters, and brothers in labor. It is my pleasure to be your keynote speaker for the 2026 Patricia Pantophlet Memorial Lecture. Sister Patsy was a strong trade union leader, a voice that still resonates in the region today. She was astute and powerful in her defense on promotion of the rights of workers. I had the pleasure of knowing Patsy personally and receiving her wise counsel on many occasions. This evening, I speak to you as part of a Caribbean labor movement with a long and proud history. When many people hear the words trade union, they think first of wages, increments, pensions, grievances, collective bargaining, and working conditions. Yes, those matters are essential. Workers cannot live on theory. Families cannot survive on slogans. A decent wage, safe working conditions, fair treatment, and social protection are the bread and butter foundation of trade union work. But Caribbean trade unionism has never been only about bread and butter issues. Our history of Caribbean labor is a people struggling to move from exploitation to dignity, from colonial subjection to self-determination, and from voiceless labor to organized power. Its genesis cannot be separated from slavery, emancipation, indentureship, plantation capitalism, colonial rule, and the long fight by working people to be recognized as human beings with rights. The Caribbean labor movement did not begin merely as an institution of wage bargaining. It emerged from a wider struggle for justice. It was shaped from the fight against colonialism, plantation exploitation, racial inequality, poverty wages, unsafe working conditions, and the denial of basic human dignity. Across the Caribbean, trade unions helped to awaken political consciousness, build national movements, and give ordinary working people a voice in shaping their own future. So, when we speak on the theme Caribbean labor and peace, we are not stepping outside the role of labor, we are stepping into the fullness of it. Because labor is not only about the workplace, labor is about society, it's about democracy, about justice. Labor is about the right of Caribbean people to peacefully live, work, organize, and develop without domination. In today's Caribbean, peace and security should not be treated as abstract diplomatic issues. They are workers' issues. The Caribbean labor movement has helped maintain peace by turning anger into organization. In the 1930s, workers across the British Caribbean rose up against poverty wages, poor housing, unemployment, colonial neglect, and racial injustice. These uprisings could have produced deeper social breakdown, but trade unions helped convert unrest into structured collective bargaining. Political reform, labor legislation, adult suffrage, and wider democratic participation. In other words, unions became a peaceful pressure valve. Instead of workers having only riot, rebellion, or silence as options, trade unions gave them meetings, representation, negotiation, grievance procedures, strikes, mediation, arbitration, and public advocacy. That is a major contribution to social peace. The labor movement also helped build democracy. Across the Caribbean, many political parties and national leaders emerged out of labor struggles. This was not accidental. Workers understood that poor wages were connected to political power. If colonial governments and employers controlled the law, the land, and the economy, then workers needed representation beyond the workplace. Labor therefore helped move Caribbean societies from colonial rule toward greater self government, constitutional development, and eventually independence in many territories. The movement also promoted peace through social dialogue, collective bargaining, tripartite consultation among government, employers and unions, and labor dispute resolution mechanisms helped to prevent conflict from escalating. The ILO's recent work on labor relations in Latin America and the Caribbean continues to emphasize social dialogue, collective bargaining, and dispute prevention mechanisms as central to stable labor relations. Caribbean trade unions also help maintain peace by defending fairness. Where workers feel exploited, ignored, underpaid, or unsafe, resentment grows. Where workers have voice and representation, societies are more stable. Unions, therefore, contribute to what we may call positive peace, not just the absence of violence, but the presence of justice, dignity, decent work, social protection, and democratic participation. Labor contributes to peace by standing in solidarity across the borders. The Caribbean labor tradition has long connected workers' rights in anti colonialism, anti racism, regionalism, and sovereignty. For example, historical work in the oil field workers' trade union in Trinidad and Tobago shows how trade unions used worker education and publications to raise consciousness about Caribbean political struggles, imperialism, and workers' rights. We live in a region that has too often been treated as a zone of influence by powerful countries. Our sea lanes, airspace, ports, natural resources, labor markets, and political systems have all been shaped at different times by external interests. US imperialism is part of that history and part of our present reality. It can be seen through military pressure, through sanctions. It may appear through economic dependency, through trade rules, debt arrangements, development conditions, or political influence. Through the assumption that the Caribbean must align itself with the strategic interests of others, even when those interests do not serve our people. But Caribbean workers have a right to ask who benefits, who decides, and who pays the price. Because when tension rises in the region, it is not the powerful that suffer first, it's the working people. Workers suffer when conflict disrupts tourism, trade, transport, fisheries, agriculture, energy, and food supply chains. Workers suffer when governments divert scarce resources from health, education, housing, and social protection, climate resilience, and decent work. Workers suffer when fear, instability, and military posturing weaken democratic space. That is why the Caribbean labor movement must defend the Caribbean as a zone of peace. CARICOM itself affirmed this principle in October 2025, stressing the importance of dialogue and engagement in the peaceful resolution of disputes and conflict. From a Caribbean trade union perspective, this is not a slogan, it is a development necessity. But what is peace? Peace is not simply the absence of war. Peace means people can work with dignity. It means families can live without fear and young people can see a future in their own countries. Peace means workers can organize without intimidation. It means that our governments can make decisions in the interest of their people, not under the shadow of external pressure. Security, likewise, must be understood in human terms. Real security is food security. As small island states, we do not produce a lot, we import. Do we know the quality of the food we are receiving? Sorry. Job security. Hurricane Irma and COVID showed us how fragile our economies and job security are. What systems do we have or need to develop to maintain job security? Is there a national disaster relief or emergency fund for workers? We go on to climate security. Whilst people talk in other countries of climate change and climate security, we are living the actual effects of climate change and feeling its impacts. Suriname is a carbon negative country, but the effects of climate change on that country are seen daily, although they do not contribute to it at all. Then we look at energy security, community security, democratic security, and workers' security. When we speak about peace and security in the Caribbean, we cannot ignore the violence destroying our communities from within. Across our region, we are seeing increasing violence in many forms, but especially gun violence. And we must ask a hard question. Where are these guns coming from? The Caribbean is not a major producer of firearms. Our small island states do not manufacture the weapons that are killing our sons, brothers, workers, neighbors, and future leaders. Yet illegal guns are flowing into our communities, and our young men are dying at an alarming rate. This is not only a crime issue, it's a labor issue, it's a development issue, it's a public health issue. When a young man is killed, the region does not only lose a life, we lose a worker, we lose a father, we lose a skilled hand, we lose a future trade unionist, entrepreneur, teacher, fisher, public officer, anything that this person could have become. The workplace loses productivity, families lose income, communities lose stability, and the economy loses human potential. CARFA and the CARICOM heads of governments have recognized crime and violence as a public health emergency. It's a public health issue, describing the epidemic of crime and violence in the Caribbean as being fueled by illegal guns and organized criminal gangs. And it's a threat to democracy itself. So when Caribbean labor speaks about peace and security, we speak about gun violence. We must speak about the external supply of weapons. We must speak about the social conditions that make young men vulnerable to gangs, crime, hopelessness, and violent identity. We need to speak about the failure to provide decent work, meaningful opportunity, counseling, mentorship, education, and community belonging. We cannot police our way out of this alone. Strong law enforcement is necessary, but it's not sufficient. We need to stop the guns at the ports. We must strengthen customs and border controls. We must hold exporting countries accountable. We must disrupt trafficking networks. But we must also address the demand side: poverty, unemployment, school failure, family breakdown, trauma, social exclusion, and the absence of hope. From a Caribbean labor perspective, every illegal gun that enters this region is an attack on workers. Every young life lost is a blow to our collective future. Every community held hostage by violence weakens the foundation of decent work, democracy, and peace. That is why trade unions must not remain silent. Labor must call for a Caribbean wide response that treats gun violence not only as a policing matter, but as a workers' rights, public health, social justice, and regional security emergency. A Caribbean that is militarized is not automatically secure. A Caribbean that is dependent is not truly secure. Workers' silence is not democratic. When unions are weak, our society. This is why trade unions must speak beyond the bargaining table. We must continue to negotiate wages and benefits, but we must also defend sovereignty. We must continue to protect workers from unfair treatment. And we must also challenge policies that deepen inequality. We must represent members locally, but also stand in solidarity regionally and internationally. The Caribbean labor movement must say clearly, our region must not be used as a staging ground for conflict. Our people must not be drawn into wars of influence between powerful states. Our development must not be shaped by fear, dependency, or coercion. And we must be equally clear that peace without justice is fragile. If workers are underpaid, disrespected, silenced, or excluded from national decision making, there is no true peace. If young people cannot find meaningful work, there is no true security. If public services are weakened, there is no true stability. If workers cannot organize freely, democracy itself is incomplete. That is why, to me, the recent advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice on the right to strike is so important. On the 21st of May, 2026, the ICJ affirmed that the right to strike is protected under ILO Convention number 87 on freedom of association. The court recognized that even though the word strike is not expressly written in the convention, the right is inherent in the freedom of workers and employers to organize. This matters for the Caribbean. The right to strike is not simply a tool for industrial pressure, it is a peaceful, democratic instrument. It is how workers say, when all else fails, we will not be invisible. We will not be voiceless. We will not allow decisions about our lives to be made without us. Of course, the right to strike must be exercised responsibly, strategically, and with regard for essential services and the wider public good. But we must reject any attempt to treat strike action as disorder, disloyalty, or economic sabotage. A strike is not a breakdown of democracy. Properly understood, it is part of democracy. Without the right to strike, collective bargaining risks becoming collective pleading. So, in the face of imperialism, militarization, and economic pressure, what is the role of Caribbean labor? First, we must educate. We must educate our members so they understand that global politics affects local wages, prices, jobs, migration, and public services. Second, we must organize. Fragmented workers are vulnerable workers. Organized workers can influence policy, protect rights, and defend democracy. Third, we must advocate. Trade unions must have a voice in national and regional discussions on foreign policy, economic policy, climate, migration, and development policies. Fourth, we must build solidarity. The struggle of a worker in Haiti, Jamaica, Guyana, St. Martin, Trinidad, Barbados, Anguilla, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, or Cuba is connected. Our histories differ, but our future is shared. Fifth, we must defend peace, not as passive silence, but as active justice. Peace requires fair wages, decent work, democratic freedoms, respect for sovereignty, and regional cooperation. Caribbean labor must therefore offer a bold, balanced message. We are not anti American people. We are not against the workers of the United States. Instead, working people everywhere share many of the same struggles. But we are opposed to imperial domination. We are opposed to militarization. We are opposed to external control over Caribbean destiny. We are opposed to any system that places profit, power, or strategic interest above the dignity and safety of our people. In closing, Caribbean trade unions must remember who we are. We're not merely negotiators of increments, responders to workplace complaints, or heirs to a movement that helped build Caribbean democracy. Our task is to carry that legacy forward, to defend decent work, to protect the right to organize, uphold the right to strike, promote peace with justice, to insist that the Caribbean belongs to Caribbean people. Because there can be no true security without sovereignty. There can be no lasting peace without justice. And there can be no democracy without the organized voice of labor. We must defend not only wages but lives, not only jobs but futures, not only workplaces but the peace and security of the entire region. Thank you.
Wow. I think that definitely deserves a standing ovation. Listen, I was trapped between being host, note taker, researcher, everything at the same time, Comrade, I want to thank you for that keynote address for so many reasons because you raised a number of critical points. Now, initially you said that you only want 10 minutes, but I was checking the time. And there's an inside joke about trade unionists, right? That there's no such thing as a trade unionist who does not like to talk. You understand? And I know for
Yes.
a fact you could have gone on for another 20, 30 minutes easily.
Yep.
Easily. You understand? Like how we say on Samantha, you just cut in style. But
Oh
as I
God.
said, I really want to commend you for that thought-provoking presentation. As you was talking, I was trying to scribble some notes. What I liked was that you started your presentation placing the historical roots and role of the labor movement in the Caribbean within its proper context. And you reminded us that labor is connected to so many facets of life, and it would be a disservice to the union to just limit it solely as negotiating for wages or running to the workplace when there is a grievance or a critical concern. So I really appreciated you broadening our perspective with that is concerned. More importantly, I like the way how you underscored its connection to democracy, but also to a number of liberation movements throughout the region that was, pursuing self-government. You also talked about the major and significant contributions of the labor movement, because I would imagine that many people think that the benefits we enjoy today
Yes.
fell from heaven, or they claim they were written by the finger of God, not knowing it was the result of countless years of sacrifice, right? Countless years of agitating and advocacy on behalf of those labor leaders of the past. So,
Hmm.
of course, you have to pay homage to many of them. I love the way how you made the connection between labor's role in speaking or identifying gun violence, not only as a public health, but its impact on the labor market by whenever we lose a person, we
Yep.
lose a worker, and we've lost the contribution that that person would have likely made. I really appreciated that particular, supply chain because it brought a lot of things in focus. Um, and of course, what really stuck out with me, at least, was when you said that we must not only defend workers, we have to defend futures.
Yeah.
And peace without justice is fragile. So those was just some of the things I was able to scribble down. I'm going to need a copy of your presentation,
Of
honestly speaking.
course.
I'm
Of
going to
course.
need that because I think that in itself is a masterclass. It
Yep.
was very refreshing, right? And it has really stimulated me to do some digging, in this particular area. Because as you correctly pointed out, usually, workers, members, they place unions in a box.
Yeah.
But when we are to really understand, the different ways that unions were involved and how they were able to organize every sector of the economy. And I mean every sector from the youth, women, seniors, and the different, different types of jobs within a particular economy. I often I hold Grenada very dearly. in
Yes.
my heart, And in my spare time, I would go over some of the speeches by, Maurice Bishops and others. And I was always impressed by his dedication towards organizing the masses, where they would have, let's call it schools under the Taman tree. And
Right.
workers were being taught, and they really championed education because they understood that an informed workforce is an empowered workforce. You see, and especially in this age of propaganda, one has to be equipped, right? One has to be equipped with the requisite information. One has to be equipped with the tools, right, to critically analyze text as well as developments to understand what is working for or against our interests. You see, and we can go down the line with the Cuban Revolution. We can go down the line with Amilcar Cabral with his revolution in Guinea. And because the blueprint is there, and what I loved most, comrade, was to show again that our at least labor leaders in the let's consider the 19th century, right? They were vocal on every issue affecting workers, whether at home or abroad. One of my favorite how would you say it recounts is when I learned about Bradshaw in St. Kitts, right? And when of course, we had the criminal apartheid government, and he would instruct, workers not to touch nothing coming from that part of the world, right? No black hands are to touch those particular products, to paraphrase what he said. So it really demonstrated that global consciousness that unions had. And not because something is not affecting me here, that doesn't mean I cannot speak out against or in support of trade unionists, or developments in another part of the world. Right. So
Exactly.
that's what I love. That's the how you say the type of trade unionism I came up under. You see, we don't limit ourselves just to bread and butter issues. Whether
Right.
it's a hole, whether it's a hole in the public road, whether it's the quality of education, whether it is wages, whether it is foreign policy, right? Because that's something I don't see enough. I don't see enough unions challenging foreign policy, at least in my neck of the work, in my neck of the woods. You see, and this is not to, criticize, it's just an observation, right? Because when we were back in COVID, when we were busy trying to agitate and raise awareness about the impacts of the cost cutting measures. Can you imagine cost cutting measures in the middle of a pandemic, right? But we challenged Dutch foreign policy, and we went a step further to show how this particular measure undermines the quality of life, of the workers on St. Martin, who they claim they want to help. But
Yeah.
you see, I fall into my own trap. I say trade unionists can't keep it up, right?
Oh
But but
gosh.
but, but comrade, before I jump into some questions, I want to recognize my mom, Rita Pantophlet. She sent a message. She said, "Good night." She is here, and I am sure that there are other members of the family who are tuned in. So I really want to, recognize and pay homage to my mother, who was always supported this particular effort, as well as the other family members.
Hi, Rita.
Right. So comrade, let's go back to the subject matter. We have seen the election of the 47th occupant of the White House. And since his election, we have seen let's call it the rise of the Monroe Doctrine 2.0, right? Where they believe that, this part of the region is basically their backyard, and they have every right to intervene or interfere in the internal matters and to force independent governments to bow and bend to its will, right? What within in this particular time, how can we as trade unionists position ourselves basically to push back against I can call it US imperialism in the region?
Wow. That's a deep question. We can only push back if we are together. Anguilla is 35 square miles. St. Martin is what, 37?
37.
So, and what is the size of the US? You know, how can we as small islands do that? We can only do that collectively. And we have to think about it. That's why we have CARICOM. That's why we have the OECS, because we realize that individually we are too small, but if we are a grouping, we are bigger, because the only thing that really divides us is the water. The struggles are the same. When you go to a trade union meeting, for instance, the CPSA conference is being held in July in Grenada.
Hey.
So when you think about that, you're going back. When I had the privilege of attending industrial relations course with Cipriani College of Labor. It's a longer name than that, but just say Cipriani for now. And when I got into the history of the Caribbean trade union movement, that is why I was able to talk the way or write the way I wrote in that paper, because you can imagine after World War I that we had Caribbean people going and fighting, and then they were coming back and they were being told that, oh, after going and putting your life on the line, you're still supposed to be under a different rule. You're not supposed to share your view. You're not supposed to do these things. And that's where really and truly there were stirrings before, but the Caribbean labor movement really started then, in earnest, I should say. We had, and when you look at the way the region was when our leaders came from a trade union background. Look at the kind of social protection, the way that the workers were treated, as opposed to now, where although they are workers, they may not be from a trade union background. Because I know for sure in Anguilla, our trade union background is not strong. I don't know about St. Martin. I know in other countries, because people have become very individualistic and feel that they don't need to be part of a grouping, not realizing that if you are part of a bigger grouping, you can get more accomplished. There are going to be individual matters, yes, but collectively, everybody needs to have the same fair treatment. And I don't know if I answer your question.
No. You started. Yes. You started. Go ahead. Go ahead.
But I think that we can only fight against anything collectively. We can't do it individually. And we have to realize that it's the same foe, for want of a better word, that we are fighting. We're fighting for basic things for our people. Because everybody is a worker. And I think that sometimes when people are in senior management or other positions, they don't realize that they too are workers. And we need to remember that we're all workers, and we should all look for the best for everybody, not just for some, but for everybody.
All
So
right. And
collectively is the way to go.
and I agree. I agree. Definitely, unity and solidarity is definitely a critical component. But to go back to what you said with regards to World War I, right?
Hmm.
Because that was really a critical moment for Caribbean workers also.
Yes.
Yeah. What I would say is that in my observations, at least a number of the, let's call them progressive leaders at the time, right? To me, they had a clear ideology. And as a result of that particular ideology, they were then able to train and institutionalize their particular ideas. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's something I really appreciated. So whether they call themselves left or whatever have you, to me, unless the circumstances warranted a shift in their ideas, but they were what they were to the core. You
Yeah.
understand what I'm saying? And that's something I really appreciate, because where they stood. You
Yes.
understand? Like, I mean, like how you mentioned CARICOM. Sometimes I have my questions about CARICOM. You know, of course, I believe in Caribbean unity, right? I believe in federation. Yeah, but sometimes the way how I see our leaders I would say, fold in front of US imperialism, I start to scratch my head. You
But you
understand
have
what I'm
to
saying?
think, do they understand why CARICOM came into being? And education to me is a very important part, not just the school education,
Correct.
informal education, trade union education. A lot of the systems and a lot of the way that we work in governments today in the public service has been mandated for hundreds of years, and it was it may have been the right thing then, but does that mean that we shouldn't change it slightly now? Does it
Mm.
have to be that way? We have to look at it. And I don't think, because the way that the world is moving and the technological advancements, people don't have time to do that deep work, to think about, let's change this structure, let's change this procedure. Recently I read something to say that I think a couple of hundred years ago we didn't need passports.
Who is we?
People.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant people of African extract.
No, no, people didn't
Okay.
need passports. I know
Yes.
that, what, in the last, 60 years, a child could be added to a parent's passport, but now that child, no matter how young, no matter how small, has to have their own separate passport.
Yes.
So I technology is good, and I have to say, as the home of .ai, I cannot say anything anything negative about .ai,
Yes.
but we have to know how to use it, and we have to use it wisely.
I totally agree, because I think we are living in very exciting times,
Yes.
right? And what I've noticed is that sometimes the abundance of information seemingly overwhelms individuals to the point where they probably lost interest,
Yeah.
in a particular issue or cause. Like, for example, sometimes, when you have conversation with certain individuals, and you explain to them what's happening in the world and how we ought to interpret it. They ask you where you get at, you understand, or how
Yeah.
you know that, whatever. Like, but it's there, it's in the newspaper, it's online, it's at this particular journal, you see. But let's call it, the system has done such a great job in keeping us busy and distracted
Yes.
and constantly chasing short-term gratification with shiny objects, that oftentimes our focus, it causes our focus to shift, in my
Yeah.
opinion. And we've developed a kind of posturing that it's someone else's problem,
Yeah.
it is not our problem, you
It's true.
see. So that's why I always, again in my observation, especially of CARICOM, since again the election of the 47th occupant of the White House. I'm just watching the conversations. I am, witnessing the exchanges between leaders who profess unity, who profess a common heritage, a common future. But then I mean, it's just me. Maybe this is just for public consumption, but at least in the public domain, there seems to be sharp differences of opinion on how we should go forward. You have some group saying, well, what's happening in Grenada isn't cool. And another is saying, good for them,
Yeah.
to use my words. And I'm saying, but guess what? Tomorrow you can be in that situation also,
Exactly. Exactly.
and that's what I find very concerning amongst leaders who I believe know better. Yeah, but when it
Yeah.
comes down to, let's call it, personal and national interests, it seems to be fair game, unfortunately. So that's why for me, I always look forward to the utterances, right, and the actions of trade union leaders, because to me, they should be that uniting force that
Yeah.
says, look here, you red, you green, whatever have you, but we're mobilizing around this issue because it's wrong. And I would even go as far as say that if it wasn't for the solidarity demonstrated, into islands and regions or whatever, a lot of us wouldn't be in the position we are in today.
That's true.
you
That
know.
is very
So
true.
sometimes we act as if we are here because of our own merit, and really and truly is because of the energy and the sacrifices of others.
Yeah.
You
The
know,
interconnectivity, we don't realize how interconnected we truly
correct,
are. Yeah.
correct, and that's why sometimes I would tell persons, you know, if it was not for the uprising, right, the Haitian Revolution, maybe we would not, the region would not have been emancipated maybe 200 years later.
I agree.
You
I
understand?
agree
Because
100%.
that really shook the region. You
Yes.
see, when Fidel and when Fidel and them won, right, were able to liberate Cuba, they didn't just stay in Cuba.
Right.
It was exported, right? Again, labor leaders have been going from island to island to island, preaching the gospel of workers' rights and dignity and so forth and so on. That's part of our heritage.
Yes, it
You
is.
understand? That's part
And
of
we
our
have to
heritage.
understand that and we have to learn
Definitely.
from it. Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. You know, so there is so much we can extract from that. Another question that came to mind, Susan, was is as follows, right? The Caribbean is oftentimes referred to as a zone of peace. In light of all that has transpired, the unaliving of fishermen, the buildup of military assets, the influx of weapons into the region, right? Now we are seeing, of course, we cannot forget the embargo, the economic embargo placed on Cuba.
Mm.
And of course, we are hearing rumors and whispers about a possible invasion of Cuba very soon. With all of those things happening, can we really, can we continue to refer to the Caribbean as a zone of peace?
I think so for the most part, yes.
Yeah, explain.
Because we as a Caribbean people, we are still peaceful. It's the outside influence that is coming in that is trying to destroy that peace. And I think that when we look, the world has become a violent place. And not just the Caribbean, the world. When you see different things popping up in different areas, and you're wondering why this was always a peaceful area, there. I don't know what to call it, but there's a blanket of violence across the world, and we need to center ourselves on peace. Now, I know when you talk like that, people think that, oh, you're trying to be righteous, you're trying to be this.
Kumbaya.
Yeah, yeah. It's not that. It's that you have to protect your mind. I mean, there are so mental health is a major part of my psyche. How I try to deal, how I use music to help with stress, and I think that we need to give our young people coping mechanisms. We need to give our adults coping mechanisms. We are, technology is making us, just yesterday I had a conversation with a friend about, I think there's something now you can get a machine that massage, like if you have stress in your shoulders, before somebody would massage you, now there's a machine that can do that. So what is technology? If we embrace technology fully, we are becoming alone. That social interaction, that conversation, like we are having a conversation now, and look, we're using technology to have it, but we are still having a conversation, and we have to rule technology. We can't allow technology to rule us. That is what I think, and I think a lot of people are allowing technology to rule them. Oh, I can get this done using technology. Let me go ahead and do it. Forget about somebody else. We had, in some cultures still, elders are revered. in many of the modern societies now, go to the side there. It's not your time now. It's a new time. But what they learned, or what they know, can help us now, and we need to remember that. We need to don't throw away everything. That there are certain things that we need to embrace and remember. History, we have to think about history. History repeats itself,
Yes.
and we can see how history repeats itself. And when you look at, people are seeing history repeating itself and sitting down and saying history is repeating itself and doing nothing from stopping history repeat itself. What does that say about us? It means that we never learned the lessons. Or as long as it suits us, then we're not going to rock the boat because I feel that I'm going to get something out of it at the end. Forgetting that you as an individual, or you as your family, or you as your community might get something. But what about the people who are next door? And when those people are marginalized and they can't get what they need, who are they coming for? They're coming for the people who have. So I think that trying to get, there's always going to be inequality, but as long as we can try and get things as equal as possible, then we're in a good stead, I think.
I agree. I agree with you. I would even I often have some great conversations with older folks, right? And I remember there was a time I was having a discussion about, politics with this particular gentleman. And, he's watching me, with my trade union activism and on the radio and trying to educate workers and such. And one day we was having a conversation and he was like, Bakari, I see what you're doing and it's very admirable. But sometimes you have to understand that some people are paid not to solve the problem. Some people's salary, right, is dependent on the problem not being solved.
That's true.
And that was heavy. That was heavy. And when I actually tested this particular theory, because when you're in a movement and you're defending workers, you always have management who like to stonewall everything.
Hmm.
But the moment this particular manager gets pinched and squeezed, then the confessions start to come up, and they start to explain to you how the inner workings of the system is actually put together. You understand? So
Yeah.
that's one thing that it definitely taught me. But let's go back to the importance of educating our members, because my aunt, our comrade, Patricia Pantophlet, she was very, very big on educating workers. When we say educating workers, what exactly do we mean?
For me, educating our workers is letting them know the history, how trade unionism came into being, but also knowing what your rights are.
Yes.
Knowing that if you are asked to do this, you have the right to say no. That if your manager calls you into a meeting, you don't have to go in on your own. You can walk with somebody. And if they say that you can't walk with somebody, then you don't have the meeting. That if you are brought up on charges, you have a right to know what the charges are before you go into the meeting. You should
Of
not go into
course.
the meeting and then be told the charges. Or if you are, then you need to have the opportunity to go back and defend yourself. You know, those are the basic things. Know your rights. Know why you are allowed to. You work from 8 to 4 or from 9 to 5. Why you have the shift work that you have. Why certain things are in place, because it wasn't because management decided it. It's because workers lost their lives for it. I can remember reading, and I think there was a movie at one point in time about how persons were killed because they were trying to form a union.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
there when you think about it, I came into the trade union movement because of the miners' strike in the UK.
Oh,
I was a young girl and watching it on the news every day. I think I was just finishing secondary school. I think so. And watching and seeing for how long this strike went on for and how collective they were fighting for something that was basic. They were fighting for the right to be able to be alive at the end of a shift. They were fighting that if something happened to them, that their families would be compensated. Something very basic. And to me, that showed me the collectivity of people, how when we come together to fight a common cause, the changes that we can make, we can get a decent wage and not have to think that, oh, I have to have 5, 6, 7 jobs in order to make ends meet. Now people have 5, 6, 3, 4, 5 jobs because they want to live a certain standard, not because of necessarily necessity. And if you do that, that's your choice. But then at the end of the day, what is the impact on your family? What is the impact on you as a person, your body, your health? You know, we have to think about those things. Yes, it's nice to be able to have a big house, but when you build a 5 bedroom house because you have this amount of children, and then each of those children go and build their own, what are you left with? You're left with a 5 bedroom house for a couple or maybe even one person, you know,
correct.
and then when you close your eyes, those same 5 children going to fight over it and probably fall out, although they've lived their lives as brothers and sisters all the time, but then they become enemies. So what is it that we are looking for? What is it that we are fighting for? What are we educating ourselves for? We have to think about, I work with the Fisher Folk Association here in Anguilla as well, and collectively we can do so much. When I went to the World Forum of Fisher Peoples, and there were people from all over the world. I mean, literally all over the world, places I hadn't even heard of. And I met persons from there, and you realize that their issues are exactly the same as those in the Caribbean. Because injustice is not just a Caribbean issue. It's not just
Correct.
a trade union issue. It's a global issue. And there will always be people who feel that they have the right to have more, and in some cases that may be justified because they would have made sacrifices elsewhere to get there, but everybody deserves the basic start. Why should somebody not have food, not have electricity, not have the basic education because you want to be able to throw away something? I think everybody needs that basic, and then from that basic, then you build up. But everybody deserves that basic. There shouldn't be, to me, there shouldn't be people in poverty.
And you mentioned earlier that you followed a course at Cipriani,
Yes,
right? Because we're still on the topic of education.
right.
Um, would you recommend that particular course to workers in the region, and
Oh,
why?
most definitely, wholeheartedly. It is an intense course, but what you learn, one of the courses is Caribbean labor history. Another one
Who's
is
the
collect.
author? Who's the author?
No, it's not.
Oh, the
It's
course.
it's a
That's the name of the
taught
course.
course.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, 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 okay.
yeah. It's a taught course, but they go into such depth: collective bargaining, industrial law. You know, there are so many different areas. Then you have the whole power struggle because unions exist because employers are powerful, and unions balance the power between the employer and the employee. And when you see the ILO have tried in lots of ways to increase that, with through that the whole tri-party system where you have the government, you have the private sector, and you have the unions. The fact that we had to go to court to ensure that we were able to continue the right to strike speaks volumes about the psyche, the mindset of some of the people who are in positions of power today. Because why should we have to fight for a fundamental right? It should be fundamental, but we have to be continuously vigilant. We can't think and sit back and say that, okay, that's already done. I don't have to do it again. But we have to continuously fight. And that's why we have to continuously educate. We have to continuously educate. We have to remember, we have to have these kind of conversations. Why do we have Labor Day? Labor Day is not a day off just for being a day off. It's a significant day and it should be revered like all other days. But and I see in other islands where it is a big thing. And I often wonder how within the Caribbean, why are there different Labor Days? Is it because,
Hmm.
you know, I don't know, but I often I wonder that.
That's a good question. That is a good question. And you know, just to go back to what you said, I can't remember if this is the name of a book, right, or if someone said it. But one thing I have learned is that I embrace is that freedom is a constant struggle,
Yes,
right? So the same way how capital is always reinventing itself, always looking for ways to, extract the maximum out of labor, out of scarce resources and such,
yes,
labor in turn must do the same.
it's
Just like
true.
what you said, we constantly have to sharpen our skills, get new information, find new ways, new strategies in order to be relevant within the scheme of things, you see, because capital will say and do all sorts of things to make it seem as though labor is the issue.
Yes,
Whereas without labor, nothing exists.
exactly.
I mean, I often have fun having discussions and debates with my capitalist friends, and they would often tell me it's about, it's a guy with the ideas and the capital who was able to bring these things into existence. And I'm saying, well, you know what? My grandmother taught me that the man with ideas don't have money. You understand? No, no, sorry. Yeah, the man with ideas don't have money, and the man with money don't have the ideas.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? So a lot
But
of the
not
things
only
that
that, who's going to carry out the ideas?
But exactly, the same worker, the same worker. Let's continue on education. Susan, I know you love to read, or rather, I know you hate to read as much as I do, right? I'm glad nobody can see my bookshelf in the back, right? Because
I can see it.
that would have betrayed what I just said. But Susan, could you share with us some titles, right, when it comes to the history of labor in the Caribbean, or just labor in general, that you think every serious trade unionist should get their hands on? I put you on the spot now.
You are. You're making me feel like I need to go into the other room and get some of the book.
Well, if you have to do that, go right ahead. I'll play some music in the meantime.
I could show you. Oh my goodness, I have so many books and so many journals, so many
Okay,
things that have been done by PSI, Public Services International.
good.
You know, the it's not that they're doing so much as books anymore. They're they're doing studies and
Yes,
seeing the difference. The
yes.
ILO is doing a lot of work because to produce books now, people are not gonna unless you're doing a course, you're not gonna buy a big tome, a big book. I mean,
Oh
I
no,
would, but
I
not.
mean I will.
I guess I know. But there, let you know what I'm going to get some of my books. So hold
Please
on.
do. We here
Okay,
waiting.
hold on.
Family just give us a few minutes, right? And Susan is going to share some of her titles from the bookshelf that she considers to be recommended reading, right, for trade unionists. Whether you're a seasoned trade unionist or you're just now coming into the movement, it gives us information, it informs our analysis, and it gives us a way on how to interpret the world, so that we as workers understand what our objectives are, what the mission is. Sometimes we have to be reminded as to the important role that trade union played, not only in peace but also in the development of the nation. So these are things we cannot take for granted. These are things that we cannot underestimate. And as I said earlier, we constantly have to inform ourselves, because an informed people is an empowered people. I read that somewhere. I can't remember who was the author, but it resonated deep with me. You understand? Because many a times the capitalist, the employer, is hoping that you are not aware of your rights. They are hoping that you are unable to critically analyze and assess and discuss a particular policy or law, right? Into maybe to safeguard your particular interest and your career. I see here my mother, Rita Pantophlet, is saying, please don't, Susan. Susan, stop. I beg you, just leave Susan alone, right? Because I know she has a wealth of information. And as they would say, sharing is caring. I mean, one of my favorite books, family, when it comes to the labor movement on St. Martin, and it's no secret, it's a very important work entitled Friendly Anger, and it basically chronicles the rise of the labor movement on St. Martin. It gives basically an expose on the different trade unions on the island, and how they were able to contribute towards promoting and advancing workers' rights on the island. And of course, just like Susan, I mean, there are so many other titles that kind of escapes me right now, but I know I have to take a quick look. I will see a few. But so we are hoping that you are enjoying this conversation. And of course, we are kindly asking that you share the link, subscribe, like, and of course, give us feedback, because we do these particular podcasts for you and yours. And of course, if you have any questions, you can always, join the conversation. You can ask a question, or maybe you want to be a guest. We always welcome different opinions in the interest of knowledge production, of course. Susan, you're back.
Yes.
Uh-huh. Oh, goodness. Now, why would you want Caribbean workers to read a book that not only influenced, right, the likes of Malcolm X and the Black Panthers, but also very serious leaders within the Black Power movement? Why should workers read The Wretched of the Earth?
Because it's about organization.
Uh-huh.
It's about
Tell
representation. It's about
Okay.
telling your story. It's about telling your truth. That because I mean, this is an industrial relations textbook. You see how
Okay.
thick that is. This is a textbook, but this
Yes.
is a reality book.
Yes. Correct. Correct.
Then this is another tome that I bought,
Okay.
Engendering Caribbean History.
Okay. And what
You
is
know,
this about?
and this is about how when you hear stories about the Caribbean, the different histories, there are things in here where women fought as well. They fought for their rights as well. They were
Totally
right
agree.
there. They were right there beside the men fighting, and we
Totally
need
agree.
to remember that, because without the women you wouldn't be able to do it. Then you have this gender and management.
Okay. Okay.
And this is a book that is by the Caribbean Public Services Association.
All right.
public sector unionism from
All right.
1970 to 2010.
Okay.
The CPSA, well, Dennis Clark was the author, but it was done through the CPSA.
That Mr. Dennis Clark, boy, hard worker, boy.
Very much so. Then you've got the point is to change the world. These are some
I,
speeches that were done, and conversations about organizing all of these different things. You need to have these books. Then, as I said before, we have the things that the ILO is doing. This I don't think this is, yeah, this is the ILO promoting constructive approaches to labor relations in the public service. These are all downloadable from the ILO website.
yes,
And
yes,
you've
yes.
got the Manual for Collective Bargaining.
Yep.
And this is a book from one of the biggest union organizers in the US, the Million Dollar Organizer,
Okay.
you know? And then we have Labor Law for Good Industrial Relations. This
Nice.
is this was Deborah Thomas, Justice Thomas. She was in the Trinidad and Tobago Industrial Court. She was
Yes.
the lead judge, I think, at one point in time. She wrote two
Okay.
books. This is one of her books. And I'm going to even say, because you can't always read just textbooks, you have to take
True.
a whole bunch of things in. You see it?
Things African trilogy. Okay, yes, yes, yes. Chinua Achebe, yes, yes, yes.
Yes. And Chimamanda, I love her books. You have to read widely
That's
to
right.
know.
That's right.
And reading novels, reading historical novels, reading modern day novels, there's often the struggle is within them. The story may not be about them, but you can pick up the struggle, and you can pick up the organizing through them.
Yes.
So I mean, it's important that we continue to read. I shouldn't say it, but I love to read. I now I have books that my children tell me is their heritage, because I spent all the money on books, because that is a weakness that
No, I mean,
I
it's a
have.
fact.
Yeah, but we have to have books, and sometimes when you remember you read something and you go back to it and you realize you read it differently. And of course,
Yes,
the biggest book that everybody has in their house is the Bible. And when
that's
you
right.
when you look at passages of the Bible, it tells us all about our struggles and what we should be doing. So
That is for sure. I mean, some would even say that Jesus was a big organizer.
of
You,
course,
you know, I
of
mean,
course he was.
but how many persons will interpret the scripture that way? Only trade unionists can do that. Only trade unionists can do that. No, I wholeheartedly agree with you, and I especially when you highlighted the important role that women played,
Hmm.
right, from the very beginning in our struggle. I think that it's getting more attention, and rightfully so, because there are some books I want to get on the women of the Haitian Revolution, the women of either Guadeloupe or Haiti that played a role in its revolution and so forth. I
Right.
just got this a while ago, right?
Ah, interesting.
Yeah,
Latanya Duncan.
yeah, so it really talks about the role of the women in Marcus Garvey's movement. And they were saying that it is the women who really propped up the organization and kept it humming, for a number of years. And that really caused the organization to grow. As I mentioned earlier, Friendly Anger, written by Jose Lake Jr., is one of my
Yes, I
favorite
couldn't
texts.
find that copy.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite texts. When I read that book, I realized why I needed to be in this movement,
Yeah.
right? Because I am continuing that particular struggle that was started before my time to ensure that the next generation will be able to get the benefits that I enjoyed during my particular time. You see, oftentimes we just grow up, we just get certain benefits and
And we don't
privileges,
understand why.
and we don't understand the importance of paying it forward to the next generation. You see, like love him or hate him. No, it wasn't Obama that said it. It was one of the senators made a speech, and she was basically saying the road you're driving on, you didn't build that road.
Right.
The education you got, you didn't teach yourself, right? So everything, your success is really not yours. Someone paid it forward.
Exactly.
You see, and
Exactly.
that's something that I love about the union. You see,
Right.
because I grew up in it. You understand? I mean, I literally grew up in it. So whether they had the children's parties, the Christmas parties, or whether they had the protests, I was right there between my mother and my aunt, chanting slogans I didn't even understand. You understand? I really didn't understand, but as I get closer, I say, well, maybe that was part of the initiation, because you have to develop another generation. And that's something that I really loved, when I saw the older trade unionists, passing on information to the younger ones. I mean, when I got involved, Susan, I used to harass all of the mature and seasoned, all of them. I did not care. You understand? If I had to buy them a malt or a beer to sit down and talk, that's what we're going to do. You
Mhm.
understand? Because they have a wealth of knowledge,
Yes.
right? A wealth of knowledge that is still applicable today.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Another book I think is important, Susan, is called From Chattel Slavery to Wage Slavery. I
Hmm.
can't remember the name of the author, but what I loved about this particular book is that it gives specific instances where the enslaved African population was able to organize against, right?
Yep.
Against the slave maker, right? To somehow extract quote unquote benefits.
Right.
You
Because when you
see?
think about it, emancipation was probably the biggest labor movement.
Of course.
When you
Of
really
course.
look back at it.
The history of I consider him to be my mentor, one of my mentors, right? Jose Lake Jr.
Hmm.
Whenever we spoke, right, especially about these particular matters, he always reminded me the history of the Caribbean is a history of capital and labor.
Yeah.
That is it.
And
It's
there's
a
another book.
constant. Sorry?
There's another book, From Capitalism to Slavery. I can't
Eric
remember.
Williams. Eric
Yes.
Williams.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Eric Williams, right? And of course, we can't forget his history of the Caribbean,
Right.
which is a brilliant. I mean, I don't understand how he was able to put so much facts and information in a tiny book, but that's a brilliant. I think we who are in the movement, right? And anybody who was in the movement, if we do not take the time to understand and appreciate the history of the Caribbean, the history of workers, the vital role that they have played, we won't understand nothing that is happening today. If
Yeah.
we don't understand that so-called emancipation only came about because they no longer had use for us,
True.
we won't understand what's happening,
That
right?
is.
If we don't understand how technology at one point displaced workers, or the manner in which the metropoles, right, basically reduced each island to be a producer of a specific product,
Hmm.
and it's still happening today. They call it
Yes.
tourism, right? They call it all sorts of fancy names, diversification and finance. They got all kind of nice names. But it's just a different way of organizing our economy to be a bit more dependent on them.
Yeah.
That's what it is. They talk about the importance of investment and good for the economy, but guess what? When that company go bankrupt, or when there's a scandal, as we saw in Trinidad with the oil field workers,
Right.
right?
Right.
As we saw, okay, it's the workers that bear the brunt of that particular situation.
Exactly.
Because of the foreign. And again, I don't have anything personal against people who believe in capitalism. I have no problem with that. My thing is that when you seek to exploit workers, right, and reduce them, right, to just a commodity,
Yep.
right, that's when I become a bit, concerned. Let's put it that way. I become
I
very
agree.
concerned. You see, not recognizing that this person has a family to support,
Yes,
right? This person has aspirations. This person want to live with dignity and so forth. But you're
exactly.
treating them like a commodity,
Yeah.
paying them the bare minimum sometimes, not even respecting their rights. I mean, come on. You see? So, that's why I like Peter Tosh in his song. He said the more things change, the more they remain the same, right? And that's why it's so important to follow these courses, to have discussions with people who's been in the movement longer than us and in different capacities so that we can inform ourselves.
But when you think about it, how many young people do we have that are coming into the industrial in, in relations or the trade union movement? Because there's no money in it. Because I can say that we have had a couple of scholarships with Cipriani over the years. We've
Okay.
advertised it, and persons haven't taken it up because they may be gaining knowledge, but they're not gaining, in their eyes, earning power. But they don't realize that by gaining that knowledge, you can put it to use and ensure that you are earning more. You know,
Well,
don't always connect the dots.
listen, and besides that, even if you're not earning more, you are protecting what you have.
It's true.
Because with the acquired information, it means that the employer cannot dock your pay,
Right.
right? Because of your awareness, your knowledge of the legal framework. You see, sometimes when I have conversations and people tell me they don't have a pay slip, they don't have a contract, and this is like normal, and I'm like, how could this is craziness,
Yes.
you know? And it's only because it's really two things that I have observed. It is lack of information and fear.
Yeah.
Because some people, they have this disposition where if they get to learn their rights and their truth, right, it means they'll get a bit more mouthy, and that in turn can pose a threat, right,
Right.
to their bread and butter. So therefore, right, therefore they're just going to remain still, remain quiet, and just simply accept what they're getting, the pertinence that they're getting, and hoping that everything will blow over, but not knowing that sometimes when workers raise these particular concerns, it could inspire management to review and improve
Yes.
on certain policies. You
It's true.
see? So that's what I said earlier, that sometimes we believe that the task is not ours, it's somebody else's responsibility to fix it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That has
And a
been a
lot of people think
predominant,
that.
yeah, that has been a predominant how you say behavior amongst
Yes.
many people. They feel as if you have to fix it, as if you don't have a family, as if you don't need some R&R, as if you don't need a mental health day. You understand what I'm saying?
That is
and,
very
and
true.
that's something, and that's something that I have witnessed. Even like when I was talking with more senior people who has been in the union longer than me, they would say back in the day working for government, the moment you sign, the moment you sign your contract, they give you a membership form for the union, right? And they give you we call it the LMA, which is basically your Bible, right? It consists all
Okay.
of your rights and responsibilities of public workers. Yeah.
Hmm.
And today, when I speak with younger workers, and I say, "But do
They don't
you
get it.
refer to?" They watch me as if I have a third
Uh-huh.
eye coming out of my forehead. They're like, I'm talking about like dares. You ever see a deer watching
Yes.
headlights? Like
Yes.
seriously. And I become very concerned because if you're not aware of your basic fundamental rights and responsibilities as a worker, that probably means that you're tolerating a lot of things that you're not supposed to tolerate.
Exactly. Exactly.
I become very worried. I become very worried. But I must say though, Susan, what I do, and you have to forgive me, don't judge me. But what makes me smirk, what gets me a bit excited, is when, let's say, for example, a worker or a member has a complaint, right? Then the time is ripe, unfortunately, to introduce them to their rights and
Yeah.
responsibilities. If the time is ripe, then they want to know everything. They want to know about LMA. They want to know about
Yep.
human rights charter, everything. And I'm saying, well, you know what? If this is the momentum that workers need in order to be educated, then we are going to do that also. We are not going to leave no stone unturned, because at the end of the day, I don't see worker. I don't only see work. I see family also.
Exactly.
I see families who are in desperate need of the healthcare, of the wages, of the benefits, of the decent work, the social dialogue, everything. You see,
Agreed.
I think that is so important. And one last book, Susan, there are many, but I'm trying to condense it. One book that I really, really love, and I would encourage people to get it also, is this one.
Oh, never heard of that one.
Yep. I will definitely, definitely encourage, you got a title? I can always send it
Yeah,
to you. I can always send it to you offline,
I got it.
right?
Yeah.
I would definitely encourage our brothers and sisters to read that book, because just like what you said, it really gives you names and specific circumstances where workers played an instrumental role in confronting US imperialism. Right. I had a good fortune of traveling to Costa Rica to represent my union. And, it was organized by the ILO. And I was able to interact and share ideas and experiences with our comrades from Costa Rica, Ecuador, Panama, Venezuela, and so forth and so on. And comrade, let me tell you, we in this part of the region, we got it good.
Yep. We do.
We got it
We
good.
do. We
Because when
certainly.
you hear, when you hear big multinational corporations are spending big money to undermine trade union leaders,
Uh huh.
organizations, trying to purchase influence, right? This thing is no joking matter.
It's
To
true.
even be associated with the trade union movement was basically, a life sentence. You understand? And today we can go on radio, right? We can turn over a table, right? We can walk freely, and I mean, at least, again, in our corner of the woods, at least, And I'm saying that again, if we truly understand what it means to be, a trade union, a member of the trade union, and our vital role, not only locally, but also regionally and globally, our whole posture will change. You understand?
I
Um,
agree.
just like what you talked about with solidarity, some people think solidarity is just issuing a press release,
Yep.
right? Some people think it's just a message, It sounds good. But to me, solidarity is when, for example, a company in Anguilla is harassing workers, and I get a phone call from my comrade in Anguilla, and that company has a chapter over here, we boycotting it. We boycotting it until they fix their affairs with the workers in the host country.
Yeah.
And those were some of the strategies that I have learned about that made the movement so strong.
Exactly.
Understand that is what made us strong, our ability to organize, right? And to say, hey, you know what? If something happened in Haiti,
Mm-hmm.
it affects me also. If something happened in Guyana, it affects me also.
True.
You understand? Because something that you didn't touch, and I'm surprised that you didn't touch it given all that you're involved with, is migration. And sometimes the
You want
reason,
me to talk for an hour then?
you understand? And because again, and I'm going to use the framework that you presented. When people leave, right, their country because of war, disease, or whatever have
Yep.
you, and then they come to our shores, right? Because they of course everybody deserve a decent life, but they should not be maltreated.
Not at
You
all.
understand what I'm saying? They should not be maltreated. You see, and I think this is something that we have to get serious about. Again, I love my CARICOM people, let me know. But I don't understand sometimes how we talk about Caribbean unity and everything. And then when my Haitian brothers and sisters reach, I don't understand it, Susan.
Yep.
Maybe I have to continue learning, and my utterance is just based on the limited information that I have. But it looks weird to me. You
Agreed.
see, it looks very weird to me. Then what do we mean by Caribbean unity? What we mean? Is it just about
We
carnival in cricket? I mean, what are we talking
we
about?
mean like George Orwell wrote a book. I think it was in the
1984? Animal Farm.
no Animal Farm.
Animal Farm.
When we are all equal, but
Some are
some are
more
more
equal
equal than
than
others.
others.
Exactly.
Oh gosh. And sometimes you just have to laugh, honestly speaking, because it can stop you from crying,
Yes.
But there is hope. There is hope. When I listen to this particular presentation, right? When I see unions around the world raising their voice against what's happening, across the region, there is hope. Just before our discussion, I thought to myself, what a time to be a trade unionist. What a time. You understand? There are so many things happening, and I just continue to pray that our leaders continue to make the most informed decision, and that they always remain committed, to the principles and the ideals of the trade union movement, and not get caught up. You understand what I'm saying?
No.
Not
Yeah.
get caught up, in what is unfolding before our eyes.
True.
Because really and truly, there's a concerted effort to put us back on the plantation.
They're trying to get it done, but I don't think they'll get it done. I hope they don't get it done. They won't get it done.
Yeah,
I'm not
there you
even
go.
gonna hope. I'm not
There
even
you
gonna hope.
go.
They're not gonna get it done.
There you go. There you go. Well, Susan, I did warn you that our discussion would have been 60 minutes, maximum 90 minutes, and I think we are right on
On
time.
the night, yes, we are.
Yeah, you understand? Because I know you have to do some other stuff. I'm hoping to have enough energy to do some reading tonight. Wish me luck, right?
I wish you
But
luck.
Susan, I just want to thank you for accepting the invitation to deliver this keynote address. This is the 9th annual
Amazing.
memorial lecture. This is really the brainchild of the family. When our aunt and sister passed away, I learned, of the impact she made on so many people on so many different levels. And I thought that it would be a great disservice to allow her memory to just fade away
I
into the
agree.
of history. So we continue to do our utmost to have this memorial lecture by inviting, opinion leaders, learned individuals like yourself to share ideas about, your and of course your views with regards to how you see the scheme of things, with the hope that these discussions will inspire persons to get excited about the labor movement again, or just to be a
Part
mover
of it.
or
Yeah.
shaker within their immediate surroundings and such. So I really, really want to thank you. Next year marks the 10th anniversary, and guess what?
Wow.
Next year, life willing, would have been Sister Patsy's 70th Earth Strong.
Wow.
So I am definitely hoping to do something very, very special on that particular day. I might have to take the week off, right? I might have to take the week off because at the end of the day, she is ours, right? She represented the best, right, of who we can become from humble beginnings to all of her achievements, and especially for young women that they
Definitely.
have an example that they can also strive to. So, Susan, I just want to ask you, maybe you have some closing remarks to share with the listeners and viewers.
Well, all I would say is don't stop fighting. Understand where you come from and build on what is there, and just keep moving forward. Use the technology. Make sure that you are the ruler of the technology and not that the
That's
technology
right.
rules you. But keep striving and never forget your roots.
That's right. Thank you so much, Susan.
Most welcome.
I also want to thank the viewers, of course, my mom. I see that my cousin Takia also logged on. She said it was a great discussion. And my mother says, on behalf of the Pantophlet family, we thank you for taking the mantle going forward. So I appreciate that also. So, family, there you have it. Another informative, and I would even add a thought provoking conversation where it pertains to the critical role of Caribbean labor and peace. And hopefully, you will recognize and appreciate the multi-dimensional and interconnectedness of the trade union movement, not only concerned with wages and bread and butter issues, but of course, issues concerning national development of sorts. I want to leave you in the words of my aunt, of my mentor, right? And of course, my heroine, Miss Patricia Pantophlet, when she said, the union is only as strong as its members. And I
Definitely.
also want to, of course, close out with the words of our honorable prophet, the right and excellent Marcus Messiah Garvey. Up ye mighty race, you can accomplish what you want. One God, one aim, one destiny. Have a good evening, and until the next time, be well. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.